Hello, welcome to the Hope, Health, and Healing podcast. I am Michelle Hannah Fields, and I am your host for episode 42, which is part one of a two-part series with my friends Phil and Amy Martin. In this episode, Phil and Amy talk about their journey of faith, what their childhood looked like, how God really gave them a foundation of faith early on. And they didn't realize that that foundation of faith would be instrumental in their adult life when their son Grant was diagnosed with a heart condition. They take us on a journey of what it looked like in the early years when they found out Grant had this heart problem and how they felt God's presence when Grant was 5 years old and they knew that he had to have a surgery. Phil talks about what that looked like for him as he held to the truth of God's word and how he felt prayer as a tangible thing in his life at that moment. Amy talks about how she processed everything and how God really helped her and guided her through that season as well. They also talk about how Grant needed a procedure as a preteen, and also how God just really sustained his life through that season as well. Towards the end of our conversation in part one, they talk about how Grant was now a young adult in college and how his faith in God had grown and how he realized that his mission and purpose in life was to bring hope to other people. He worked in the BCM at Columbus State University where he was a student, and they talk about how Grant stood firm in his faith even when he was faced with a heart transplant. Sit back, relax with your favorite cup of coffee, and let this conversation with Phil and Amy encourage and strengthen you today.
Well, today I'm joined by my good friends Phil and Amy Martin, and so I always first, thank you for being here. I should say that. But I always like to start with how I know you. So Phil and I go way, way back into the computer programming world, and we had the chance to work together quite often over the life.
2 a.m. emergency phone calls when a job was...
Yes, I did not like seeing your name at 2 o'clock in the morning. But then also later, just, as you had changed to a different role, and I kept calling you because you were the expert. So I was like, Phil, I know you don't work on this anymore, but I got problems.
Right.
So just built a friendship there. And then Amy through Walk to Emmaus. And I did not know y'all were a part of that until I went on my walk. And I didn't know Amy. I knew you. But then working with you on a walk, I saw what a precious person you are. And so that friendship has just built. And so, Thank y'all.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed serving with you
Yeah.
at Emmaus.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long journey for us.
Yeah.
Right. And but I was thinking about that, and actually, like when I autographed your book earlier, that's actually I mentioned the 2 a.m. phone calls. But yeah, just you never know how God's gonna lead you, through different things and how we respond to those things. Right?
Yeah, is God always brings things full circle, and I love that about our journey. Just how we can be involved in something secular and realize, hey, we have more in common than this secular thing, which really is so powerful. So I love that.
It's like God used the secular
to
bring us together.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And so tell me a little bit about where each of your faith journeys began, because that's so pivotal in our lives and just how we live. And honestly, without God, I wouldn't have been at TSIS, and so just how he orchestrates our lives. So where did that faith journey begin for you?
You want to go first? Or you want me to?
I can go first. Well, I had the privilege of growing up in a wonderful Christian home with Christian parents. Mm-hmm. We attended church. My dad was a deacon, so my mom, we were very active. She was, head of VBS many years. I was involved in our youth group, and so middle school is when I was saved, and then we met in high school, and he wanted to spend more time with me, so he started coming to church with me, and then we were dating, and he was coming to church and helping out with youth group, even some leadership there. Once we started college, and so then we got married, and that's when not long after that we started attending Morningside Baptist Church together, and we've always loved we've always loved serving the church, and loved singing in the choir, and helping at VBS, and
that's her spiritual gift, is singing, and that is not mine. It doesn't even register on the radar.
Yeah. Well, at least
Right.
Knowing's half the battle, right?
that is true. So I stay in my lane. She stays in hers, right? So, and for me, I grew up. Actually, when I tell the story, I never remember a day in my life I did not believe in God. But also, I remember I was 14 years old sitting in a revival, and the pastor, whoever was preaching at the time, I don't remember who it was, but he made a comment that really just struck me. And he said, even the demons believe, and they shudder. He said, what separates you from a demon? And then he elaborated, and he said, have you ever trusted Jesus? Do you really love Jesus? And I thought, I love him, but I've never asked Jesus to save me. Like, I believe, but I've never actually said, had a conversation with Jesus, really. And it was at that moment that at 14 that I said, you know what, I want to fully trust Jesus. Now, shortly after that, 16, 17 years old, I couldn't have gotten further away from God, if I tried, because we had left the church that we were in, and really just did not find another church family for a while. And I kind of just drifted. And then when I'm 2 years older than Amy, and colossally bad in math. And so that's actually how we met, because I was the only senior in a math class full of sophomores. And so that's how we met. And when we started dating, like she said, I figured out really quickly, well, if I want to spend more time with her, I've got to go to church with her. And sitting there listening to message after message about God's love, it just reminded me of, this is what I grew up with. This is what, and I was drawn back. And then did fall into some leadership. Just went that route. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I'll tell you this: shortly after I started working in the corporate world, that's when I started feeling a tug towards ministry, and I fought it for a long time. And I just kept saying to God, I can't afford to give up this job to go do ministry. And I kept telling God what I could not do. And you probably have a similar, and I was thinking, God, I've got 2 kids that I'm going to put through college, and I can't afford to just step away from this job. And I remember praying one morning. This is right before COVID hit, and going to work. I dropped my youngest son off at high school, and going in that morning, I had tears coming down my eyes, and just praying. I said, all right, God, this is not on me anymore. This is on you. If you want me to be in ministry, you've got to pay for it. And within a couple of weeks, I got the magic email at work that said, congratulations, you're eligible for early retirement. And I knew right away. I was like, this is God.
This is it.
God just created me an opportunity and is paying for me to go to seminary now. Paying for me to step out of the corporate world, which I was never cut out for. I was never cut out for that. And now, Amy took a little bit.
I appreciate the fact that you were there.
I was there, and I miss the people. I really do miss the people, but the work itself, I don't miss it.
Like you said, the Lord did not reveal that to me right away, that He needed to leave corporate America. So I was not as receptive as to, let's go ahead and jump into ministry. It took me a little bit more.
She had to warm up to it a little bit.
I like that. And, you know, it's so true when you know that you're called. Sometimes it's still hard to say yes.
Yep.
Because you're still thinking carnally and, you know, I've got this responsibility. There's no way, God. But we don't see what God sees. You know, we don't see what He's got ahead, you know, in that. And, you know, I shared with somebody when I was kind of in that place too, and I knew programming was my thing. I'm shocked now that math was not your thing since you went into programming.
I don't know how I wound up doing it.
You know,
God, that's the only explanation.
Yeah, that's funny. But I, you know, I always knew that's what I was on earth to do, and I was going to do it until the day I died at 85, you know, or 99 or 100.
Yeah.
However long I was going to be programming. And when my boss retired, she called me in her office, and she said, "You do not belong here anymore. You realize that, don't you?" And so that seed was what was planted. And when I got the magic email, I knew too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
It is, the magic email. So, Amy, what did you always know that you were going to go into teaching?
Actually, yes. My mom was a parapro in at an elementary school where I went to school. She stayed at home with me and my brother when we were really little, but when he started school, then she was ready to, you know, go back to work. So, and that was the year she said they were hiring a lot of parapros for like first grade back then, and so she applied, and she was up there all the time anyway, you know, volunteering. So that's where she got a job, where we went to elementary school. And so I kind of, you know, seeing her and how much she loved the job, she really loved working with kids, and that kind of gave me the push to feel like that's what I wanted to do. So, so yeah, I mean, I never changed my major. I, you know, went through college and majored in early childhood education. I worked in the same elementary school all 27 years, and I just retired last year. And I worked in first and second grade, so I loved it. And so now I've moved into still teaching, you know, but now I'm teaching at a Christian school, and so I really do love it. I do.
Yeah. Now, you know, you said that God didn't reveal to you the ministry part at first. When did you realize that was the plan? How did that come about?
I think it took me some time to just kind of think about, you know, what Phil was telling me, how this really was he felt like his calling and where his heart was. And I knew that, but it's hard, like you said, to change where, you know, we were in that comfortable place of, you know, a great job. He had been there for many, many years. And so I don't do well with change. As you can tell, I stayed in the same school for 27 years. So I think that's why with me, it's just, I don't like change. I'm, you know, I'm a rule follower. I like a plan. And so it just took a little bit of time of just praying and thinking about the pros of it, you know, and how this was really, he felt like it was his calling. And I knew that. I just...
You needed time and space. Time and space to accept it. And
left brain logical, and I'm the right brain artistic. So
analytical, process oriented.
And I'm more of the, it feels good. Let's do this.
And you know, it takes that, you know, a lot of times to step into ministry, it takes somebody with that kind of personality and style, but also having somebody over here to support you in that, you know, that is, you know, a perfect way that God orchestrates it. So I love that y'all were both obedient in that, because there's a lot of blessings in obedience, and just how He directs your path and what that looks like. Right. So I know, like, Grant's story when it first began, because I've seen some testimonies of that. Talk about when you first knew he had a problem and how your faith carried you through that.
So Amy was 20 weeks pregnant when had an ultrasound, and it detected that he had massive heart problems. And and we were a young couple at that time, and so scared out of our mind. I had no idea what in the world we were doing. First time parents, and like there's not a handbook on this. Our family and the church rallied around us, and they provided support for us every step of the way. And when Grant was actually born, as it turns out, it was a misdiagnosis. What they really thought was going on with him, because they thought he would need surgery like the same day he was born or so. And but because of that misdiagnosis, they looked and they said, "Oh, this is actually a more rare condition that he's got, and he might not need surgery at all. But if he does need surgery, it might be pretty bad." And so, but I don't know, how would you say that about when we first found out that he had heart problems, and how were you processing it?
Yeah, it was really scary. I am not a person that shows emotions very well. I keep a lot of stuff inside. So I probably, didn't show how kind of scared, I was. But it, like he said, we were young and did not know anybody that had a child that, had this diagnosis, or even any kind of heart issues really after they were born. So we definitely, relied on each other a lot. Like he said, our church was great. And I would say, I kind of felt more at peace because we had so many people that were praying for us. And, my grandmother was a prayer warrior, and so, she was praying, and she had everyone she knew praying. So, just having that support from the body of Christ means so much when you're going through difficult times.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't know what to pray for. And so having those intercessors coming in, and they may not know what to pray for exactly, but allowing God to pray through them, and, the Spirit just to minister. And, a lot of times when you're in the thick of it, you're just trying to keep your head above water.
Right.
And so it takes being involved in that community of believers to really help pour into you, give you that strength and encouragement that, hey, God sees you.
And Michelle, I'll tell you, I can't imagine going through that in isolation.
Right.
Without community there to lift us up. And like you said, sometimes not even knowing what to pray for, not even having the words, but the community rallies around you and all. And it was, he wound up, did have surgery, but he was 5 years old before he had the surgery. And again, it was the community rallying around us. It was the church. And I remember when he was 5, the day he was having that surgery, and it was like a 9-hour surgery. And I remember sitting there in the waiting room, and it was almost like prayer was tangible. Like I could just feel it, and like just this calm swept over me. And like, here's my little 5-year-old boy having open heart surgery, and we were waiting. We knew it was going to be hours before we could even see him again. But I was just like, this calm just swept over me right there, where I just thought, I think he's going to be okay. Like I could just, prayer was tangible almost.
Yeah, and I understand exactly what you're saying, because I've felt that before. I've felt God's peace come down like a blanket, like I was Linus, this blanket just, comforted me. And you feel that tangibly, and that's God's presence, but he gives you that, it's a tangible kind of feeling to know, hey, I've got you. And I've got your little baby too, Now, I want to kind of pause right here and just ask, so leading up to that, like, God will always give you marked moments in your faith that you can point back to. And so I just honestly believe when you have to walk through something as hard as what you walk through with your, a baby that has potential heart problems, like that's not going to be the first thing you walk through as a Christian. I just feel like there's always going to be a marked moment that you can point back to and reference. Is there a time before that you were like, you knew God had moved on your behalf that gave you strength to know He would this time?
That's a good question. I have to really think back on that, because I think from the point of when he had his open heart surgery at 5 years old, looking back, I think I look back at 5 years ago when we had him. And we had the community around us and all that, and had such a confidence of, he was born, and all of the family and all of the church was around us there to provide for us. And I think I kind of like could look back at that and say, well, God got us through him being delivered, and he didn't need heart surgery then, and now he's 5 years old, easier to operate on a 5-year-old than it is an infant. So that was one of those little markers I look at, and I think, wow, I'm glad they're doing the surgery at 5 and not as as a newborn. Because he's just more to work with. And so that's when I'm thinking about markers to look back at. I think, there's intentionality behind what God's done, and God's led us to that point.
Yeah, that's good. Amy, anything for you that comes to mind?
I don't know that
even as a little girl.
Pinpoint. I was going to say I don't know that I can pinpoint it as that marker, but here's how I have kind of felt about my Christian walk. I have felt like God brought me up in a Christian family for a reason, and that He always kept us involved in church for a reason, because He knew one day I would need the faith to go through something like this. My life wasn't always easy, but I can always see God's hand throughout my life. And so I try to think about those positive things, how He was always walking with me, helping me every step of the way, guiding me through, the hard teenage years to face peer pressure and things like that. And I feel like all of that really built a good foundation for my faith, so that when He knew I was going to be going through, these difficult times, that I would have that to lean on.
Yeah. And I think that is so true. It's I think that's His keeping grace. He keeps you and helps you make the right decisions during your teenage years. It is hard, but that does build resilience, and it builds your faith and your trust.
You say that, I was thinking, you grew up in a Christian home all that time, and God was planting seeds of faith. That were going to come to fruition later.
Yeah, it's like your grandmother. It's a foundation. You have that solid foundation of faith that then you built on. As a child and as a teenager and young adult. So yeah. So then just really how did you see God move during that as a 5-year-old and in that surgery?
Yeah, he came through the surgery, and they told us up front. When it was over and the surgeon met with us, he said, he's the next basically 48 to 72 hours are the most critical, and he said it kind of explained all the technical stuff and all that to us, and then finally let us in to go see Grant. And when we walked in, I was not prepared for what he was going to look like, because here's my little boy, and I mean he's of course sedated, but he's just strapped down, and there's all of this equipment keeping him alive, and it looked like his just little chest was just laboring to breathe. And I remember walking out of that, because they would only let 2 people back at a time. So Amy and I were walking out to go let the next set of, the grandparents come in. And getting halfway down the hallway, and I just crumpled to the ground and, just overwhelmed. And I remember telling Amy, and Amy was kind of looking at me like, what's going on? And I remember saying, I just love him so much. And Amy saying, she said, you have got to get it together. She said, when we walk out and people see us, if they see you're crying like this, they're going to think the worst. And for me, that was such a light bulb moment when I realized eyes are on us. And people are going to look to us to kind of like a pace car in a race. They're going to look to us to say, okay, how should we be reacting? And I was so grateful for that moment when I thought, he's alive. Like, yeah, I'm crying. It's tears of joy, and I was, a slobbering mess on the floor.
Right.
But let's celebrate that he's alive right now, and then let's rally together over these next 48 to 72 hours, and so that I just think about that one moment, and I'm man, when she just told me, you got to get it together because people are going to see us, and they're going to react to our reaction.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I just thought, man, we're so connected to the people around us. So how we carry ourselves matters. So.
Yeah, that's so true, and that's great advice for any of us, because a lot of times we're the only Bible people see.
Yes.
They're not reading the Bible. They're watching us. They're watching how we walk through those moments, and that really was such a powerful statement, and something we all can carry, That's so good. Amy, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. Then talk about what was next in your journey, how.
Well, honestly, for following that, there was little things that would pop up every once in a while, but for the next several years, until Grant was 22 years old, 23 years old, he'd walk in the room and you would never know there's anything wrong with him. Of course, he had a pacemaker. He had 2 mechanical heart valves. He was on all kind of heart medicine, blood thinners and all that to keep him going. But he lived life. And, he was never thankfully drawn towards sports or anything like that. If he wanted to play anything like that, we would have to kind of steer him away from it. But he was he was a Lego kid. He loved indoors, building things and stuff like that. And so, but he grew in his faith. And I remember he gave testimony one time in the youth group, because we had, so our youth pastor, for all high school graduating seniors, he would let them give testimony. And when Grant gave his testimony, he referred back to a mission trip we had taken, that the youth group had taken to New Orleans. And he said, when we got to New Orleans, he was telling the story that when we got to New Orleans, it was June in New Orleans, hot. The dorm that the boys were staying in, the air conditioner went out.
Nice.
And I was there on that trip, and it was just like laying there at night and just covered in sweat. And it got fixed while we were there, but the first couple of days, there was no air conditioning, and we were doing a lot of hard labor. But then the last full day we were there, we took a break from all the hard labor, and we'd gone to do some ministry at some nursing homes, and then we went to do homeless ministry at some bridges. And so we were going up under some random bridges, and Grant was having to step over hypodermic needles to get to people. And he was taking them water and crackers and socks and just, washcloths. But he was sharing the gospel. And Grant said, going into that day, he was thinking, why am I even here? I've been here all week. It's hot. It's miserable. And then he said, ministering to somebody up under a bridge, and he looked around and he thought, this is all they've got. And the one thing that they could have was hope. And he said, all of a sudden he realized, this is why I'm here, because tomorrow I'll be back in my air-conditioned home, sleeping in my comfortable bed, with all my Legos and things like that. He said, but this guy's got nothing. But the one thing he can have is the hope of the future, the hope in Jesus. And that was the pivotal moment for him. So serving on missions, that was important to him. Serving in the church, any capacity. He became the youth intern at the church for a while, and then when he started college at Columbus State University, he got really involved with the Baptist Collegiate Ministries, and went off and did a summer missions project down in, what was the name of the camp? Like Happy Camp or Smile Camp or Friendship Camp.
Fellowship.
Yeah, Friendship Camp. And so he went and did that, and he loved that. And then he became president of the BCM. And he had a heart for getting people ready that were in leadership at the BCM, getting them ready to go out and do summer missions. And so he practically lived at the BCM when he wasn't at home in bed. He was at the BCM. And basically like organizing events and even just hanging out with people. And he was one of those types of people that he was everybody's best friend. He wouldn't point at somebody and say, that's my best friend. Everybody would just point at him and say, oh, he's my best friend. He just got along with everybody and wanted everybody to be included. And like I said, missions were very important to him as well.
And that has to do your heart good to see your son thriving in ministry, at such a young age.
Yeah.
That's good. Amy, do you have anything you want to add or special things?
I was just going to also add to that. I mean, he was definitely a people person. And so being around his friends meant so much to him. And I don't think we realized how influential he was among his friends until after he passed away, and just hearing all of their stories and their testimonies about how important he was in their lives and the BCM. And that really touched my heart a lot, just because, boys, they're not going to tell you anything.
Right.
You have to drag information out of them. And so I guess, I just didn't realize, how close he was to so many people in, at the BCM and CSU and his friends at church, so.
And remember, we even heard from people that we didn't know, but people he'd gone to high school with, and they let us know what an impact Grant had on them.
Yeah.
And we're like, who is this person? Like, somebody we didn't even know.
Yeah.
But Grant had an impact on their life.
Yeah.
And it's really just eye-opening. You think, man, how many lives does one life impact?
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. I think back to people in ministry, like missionaries, and they have no idea how many lives they've impacted.
Right.
But by that same token, you don't know how many lives you've impacted.
Right.
You don't either. And so just getting a glimpse of that is such a blessing.
Right.
Yeah, it's so good. So then just, kind of walk us through, knowing Grant had to have a heart transplant and what that looked like, and kind of, how you saw God even in that time.
Right. So you want to take this?
Go ahead.
He's doing great, huh?
So Grant was he was really in his last 2 semesters at CSU and was no longer president of the BCM. Really, because he was an education major, and so we knew he was going to have student teaching and all that coming up, and also he wouldn't have time for all that. But that fall semester of 23, he was very tired and just not acting himself. And we just thought, well, a lot of that is just the stress he's got with this final 2 semesters. And then around like Thanksgiving, he had gotten sick, and we took him to the urgent care, and we just thought it was the flu. And then he had just a regular doctor visit in December of 23. And at that doctor visit, they looked and they said, well, your iron's out, and your blood work does not look good. And so we scheduled a visit with the cardiologist, and the cardiologist said, well, unfortunately, the time has come that we were hoping you would never need a heart transplant, but your heart is just given up, and it just it's just worn out, and you just can't keep going.
And we had heard this before. I mean, years before, it was like, his heart function is decreasing, and we're just keeping an eye on it. A heart transplant might be in his future. So it's not like we had never heard this before.
Right.
So but still, it's still a shock to know that
the time is now.
Yeah, and like sooner than we ever thought it would be. So we were at that point where they were like, we've given different medications, we've tried everything before heart transplant, but this is where we are. This is
and to what Amy, to her point, what she's saying is that we had heard it so much that we'd almost grown numb to, well, he might need a heart transplant one day. So when we actually heard the news that, this is your only option now, it was a shock. And it was like, okay, we've been told this repeatedly. We've been told it, but we've been told it so much for so long that we were kind of thinking it would never happen. And then it did happen. And of course, at that point when he got the news, now he's into, this was January, February of 24, so now we're into to his last semester, and so he's doing his student teaching, trying to do his student teaching. But he's also he was very worried about missing school, because he said, there's only so many days I can miss, and he said, I'm right here at the end, like, this is my last class, and then I graduate. And so there were days that he forced himself to go do student teaching that he was just, he didn't want to leave the house, like he was feeling so bad. But then hearing the news that he needed that transplant, in my core, I went back to when he was 5 years old and thinking, okay, we were terrified that day, but it turned out okay. And Grant was really too young at 5 years old. He was too young to be that scared. Right. Well, as a 23, almost 24-year-old, well, I guess he was about to turn 24. He told me one night in the car, he just flat out said, I don't want to die. And I said, you're not going to die. And I told him about the statistics. I said, actually, statistically speaking, you have a higher chance of surviving this heart transplant than you did the surgery when you were 5. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. and then he had some optimism about it. And he had, after he found out the news, he went for a couple of weeks where he didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell his girlfriend. And we kept saying, Grant, you have got to let everybody know. You got to especially let your girlfriend know, because we need as many people praying about this as possible. And I don't want word to get back to her that didn't come from you. And so we finally convinced him after a while, but he didn't want her to worry. And so he finally told her. And then I think for him, that's when it was starting to become real. But he had this ongoing battle of, well, I want to graduate, And I even told him, I said, look, you might have to put this semester on hold, go get your health taken care of, and then come back in the fall and finish out. And he was like, are you okay with that? I was like, sure, we're fine. Like, your health is number one. That's really what matters. But I'll say this, I had, on one hand, confidence, thinking, okay, well, we've been through major heart surgery before. It's probably going to be fine. On the other hand, there was a little bit of darkness that creeped in.
Yeah.
And it was trying to discern, is this from God or not? And that little bit of darkness that creeped in, I kept feeling like this is not going to turn out the way we want it to. And I don't know, like looking back now, I don't know if that was God preparing me for that. When Grant he reached a point where he did contact the school, and because he had multiple hospitalizations, and finally reached a point where the hospital wouldn't let him leave. This was in April of 23, and the hospital said, you can't leave here. And Grant said, but I've got to go back and finish out the last couple of days of student teaching so I can graduate. And they said, we can't let you leave. So Grant contacted the school and told them what was going on. And the school was great. We didn't know it, but they were working behind the scenes, and Columbus State actually did honor him and actually allowed him to graduate.
That's
they
awesome.
Drove up to Emory and presented him his diploma there in the hospital. And it was just great and awesome. And I was so proud of him to see that he accomplished it. Like it took him a long time to get through it because of all his BCM obligations and just not feeling well and all that. But like he finally had that moment where he achieved getting his degree. But at the same time, he was stuck in the hospital. Could not leave the hospital. And so from April 18th was when he was in the hospital, and he was just waiting every day, waiting for the transplant to come through, and waiting for news, and he was just miserable. And we were on a rotation where it was either me, Amy, or one of the grandparents that would go and stay with him so that he was never alone. And then that was hard to do, to be in Columbus, and I'm teaching my Bible students, but my mind
he's in
is
Emory.
on my son who's at Emory waiting for a heart transplant. And then finally, Amy was with him in June, and I had come home and was getting ready basically like the next day to go up to take over my shift, and he called and he said, I got an offer for a heart, and it's going to be tomorrow. And we were all excited. And we're like, okay, thankfully this has come through. And then that wound up not, they couldn't use that heart, but then there was like the very next day was the heart that came through. But one of those times that I was with Grant's favorite book of the Bible was Job. Loved Job. And he and I had great, deep theological conversations about Job. And so there in the hospital, he wasn't in the mood to really talk much. But I thought, well, maybe this is something we can do together. So I read through Job. It took us a couple of days, but read through it. And we kind of just talked about it a little bit. And finally, at the end of Job, we were having our longest discussion. It probably wasn't 5 to 10 minutes or so, because he was just tired. And but we were talking about God's sovereignty, and he summed it up this way. He said, all I know is this. He said, if I survive this surgery, God is sovereign. And if I don't survive this surgery, God is sovereign. And when he said that, I just thought, wow, this is a 24-year-old that just schooled me. That Grant had that kind of insight into God's sovereignty, that no matter, now he didn't want to die.
Right.
It's not his plan.
Right.
But he recognized that even if I don't survive this, it's okay.
Yeah.
And that thought was not anything that I wanted him to even entertain. Like I was like, no. Wipe that out.
Yeah, let's back up, rewind that tape.
Yeah, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing to worry about. But it was just like, so from April 18th until he didn't get his heart surgery until June 13th. So it was
2 months.
a long time to be stuck in the hospital, isolated from his
Right.
friends. Like Amy said, he's a people person.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst thing you can do to a people person is stick them in a hospital
Yes.
2 hours from their home.
Yeah.
So he was like, his highlights were when his friends from college would all they would jump in a car together and go up and they would spend the day with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was some of the best pictures we got, was when all of his friends had come up and they were just hanging out with him in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And because he, then he had a connection. But man, like for him to be cut off from his, that's what I felt so sorry for him. And even, even like looking at his, not that we were prying or whatever, but we had his phone, and just like looking at some, because we needed to get some things off of his phone, and looking at his phone, he had just made so many lists on his phone of just things he was looking forward to.
Oh, wow.
Like looking forward to going home and walking around in the grass in my bare feet.
Yeah.
He missed our dog, Shelby. He said, just looking forward to going home and seeing Shelby. Just sitting at home in our room. Like little things.
Things we take for granted.
And that's what he was looking so forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really good perspective on his part. Just what you said about Job, and that's what we're called to do too. Not my will, but thine.
Yeah.
And so for him as a 24-year-old, that's powerful. That's something people 80 years old don't learn. That's a great testimony. Just of his solid faith in God.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Hope, Health, and Healing. I know that Phil and Amy has really given you some words of wisdom, things to think about, and some truths to hold on to, no matter where you find yourself in your own journey of faith. Tune in next week as Phil and Amy continue our conversation in episode 43, when they share about Grant's heart transplant, what those days look like, and how they have seen God move afterwards. If you have not followed our show, be sure to follow our show. Leave us a comment or review and share this podcast with your friends and family. Thanks, and have a great day.